Welcome to Intentional Excellence, the podcast where we dive deep into stories of resilience, growth, and transformation. I'm your host, Candice Ruggiero. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm a member of Two Speakers Bureau, podcast host, live show host, host of Candice Ruggiero Love Speaks, entrepreneur, and founder of a global education connection firm. I help educators and leaders create meaningful change. We launch a powerful series called The Lost Child, where we explore the impact of childhood trauma and the journey toward healing and empowerment. Our guest today or tonight is Jared Davis. He is someone who has faced unimaginable pain, but has turned his story into one of strength and purpose. Jared is a husband, a friend, an educator, an advocate for social issues. He's also a survivor of childhood trauma, having endured sexual abuse by a family member between the ages of 8 and 14. Growing up in a middle class, two parent home in Western New York, everything seemed fine from the outside. But behind closed doors, Jared's reality was much different. For years, he buried his trauma, following the family norm of pretending everything was okay. This emotional suppression led to binge eating, social isolation, anxiety, and depression. When he finally confided in his family, his truth was met with doubt and dismissal, and for nearly 2 decades, he carried this burden until he reached a breaking point. Through the love and support of his wife, Jared sought help and has spent the last 2 years working on his mental health, overcoming food addiction, and rebuilding relationships. Today, he's here to share his story of survival, healing, and the power of reclaiming your life. Jared, welcome to Intentional Excellence. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm
I
excited.
am just so excited to have you because I know I'm going to learn myself. I'm going to learn from your experiences, and I can't wait for my audience to know more about your struggles, but most importantly, how you overcame it. Thank you. And I just want to salute you or celebrate you for finally finding your true self
Thank you.
despite everything.
Thank you.
Jared, do you want to add anything about yourself? Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. Listing my diagnoses, I was like, oh, I forgot to tell her the PTSD one too. So so it's
Well,
kind of
thank you
this
for.
stack of things that
Oh, that's a big
just
one.
kind
So
of
thank you for sharing it
sort
now.
through. So I wanted to mention it just because it might help explain
Yes.
some other things that come up in the conversation as we go here.
And I know it's not easy to share these things that are really, this deep, but for you to be able to share it with others is really a big step. A big step, and thank you for that. And I know a lot of people were like, it's rare that they hear raw stories, real stories, and I know a lot of people will resonate with what you went through, maybe in the name, a similar or a different way. But it's. I just want to say thank you for being here in my show.
Oh,
Thank
well,
you.
thanks for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to kind of share my story.
Right,
I think it's just a topic that's not talked about enough.
right.
And as I've worked on my own healing, I've become really passionate about just making sure the subject is out there for everybody, but
Hmm.
especially for male victims and mental health in men, which is almost still a taboo subject.
Yes,
So kind of shedding some light on those shadows.
I can't wait, and thank you. By the way, I'm here in Florida. Where are you from? I always my podcast is worldwide. I just want them to know where you're from. I'm Florida, from America. Where are you from, Jared?
I'm from New York State,
Okay.
not New York City. So there's a whole other state outside of New York City. So I currently live about 4 hours north of New York City in the southern part of the Adirondack Mountains.
I lived in New York for 20 years in the Westchester County. I
Okay.
was about like 45, without traffic, 45 minutes away from the city. So it's nice to meet a fellow New Yorker. My heart is still with New York. Like
For
I'm in
sure.
Florida now, but I'm sorry. I love New York.
I'm in New Paltz tonight, and I'll be
Okay, all
driving
right.
through the city tomorrow
Right.
morning for work.
Oh, I'm jealous. I am jealous. Well, nice to meet fellow New Yorker. Again, welcome. All right, so Jared, many survivors of childhood trauma describe feeling like they were living two different lives. One that looked fine on the outside, and another filled with pain behind closed doors. Now, looking back, was there a specific moment that made you feel like a lost child? And how did growing up in an environment where emotions were discouraged shape your sense of identity, Jared?
Yeah, I think I'd add that there's actually a third layer of the
Okay.
lives we lead, and by that I mean, I think we are all familiar with sort of this notion of we wear a mask and we hide secrets and we hide things about ourselves, and we all do that to an
Yes.
extent. It's when it gets to that extent that it's unhealthy that problems arise. Um, and so I certainly had that mask of everything's great and go to school and be happy, get good grades, do all those things, and then there was this mask behind
Right.
that I wore for myself because what was happening and how I was feeling, I couldn't process. And
Right.
so I had to have a second mask internally that would help me sort of try to understand. And when I couldn't, through this, I've gotten really interested in the human brain and what it can do to protect
Right.
us. And so internally, I was saying everything's fine because I needed it to be, and then behind that mask is what was really going on. So in terms of that moment of feeling lost,
Right.
I can't pinpoint it. I just know that at a certain point, when because here's the short version, I was repeatedly being raped,
Yes.
and so there were moments where it would be happening, and I was just outside myself, almost like you're above the ceiling, just watching and looking down. Um, and I've been in therapy for the last 2 years. Like I said, I've been working on this for a couple of
Right.
years, and one of the exercises I did with my therapist, at a certain point, I had been given my childhood baby photos and books,
Right. Right.
and my wife has some of her childhood photos, and it was always interesting to me. She looks through hers and she gets a smile on her face, and she remembers, and she could do that for hours,
Right.
and I didn't want to look at them at all. Um, but as we were looking, there was a definite point when you could see in the eyes, like if
Yeah.
you knew,
There
you
was
could see it in my
sadness.
eyes. The first grade picture, I'm happy and things are good, my eyes are bright, and by the time you get to the third grade picture, because this really started kind of at the end of second grade,
Right.
by that fall, the look on my face is just different. And I've looked at these pictures 100 different times and never, I just couldn't recognize it, and I didn't,
Right.
because I was trying to hide everything from myself and bury it. So I think that feeling of loss just kind of organically grew as a
Right.
way to layer protection over myself. Um, I don't know if that makes sense, but
Of
it's
course, it does.
I,
Absolutely.
I I'm still having, and this is why I wanted to make sure I mentioned the PTSD. I still have flashbacks
Right.
to memories that I've had, but also new memories. Like
Right.
as I heal, my brain is letting me remember things.
Yes.
I had, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. A couple of years ago, my real low was, feeling suicidal and having thoughts of suicide, and since then, I have remembered when I first started talking about it. I guess if you had asked me if I had ever tried, I would have said no, because as an
Okay.
adult, I did not. But
Okay.
since I've been doing this work, I have started to remember being 9 and 10 years old and putting a belt around my neck and seeing if I could cut the air off long enough, you know, was it an intentional plan? I didn't have the words for it,
Right.
but the desire was there. Fortunately, it didn't work because I'm still here. But
Right.
that's sort of the power of the brain when you are lost. And I think that's why this work is so hard and it's so
Right.
difficult to talk about.
Because I'm an educator, right? And
Mhm.
for 30 years, I've been in the field of education, and I love every student that I have in my classroom. And sometimes, as a teacher, I'm not just their teacher, I'm their mom. For
Mhm.
1 year, they're mine, right? So I've dealt with students. I know when someone feels something, like when something is going on, at home. Sometimes I can sense it. And I don't know how you were able to like cover it up when you went through something like that. Now I I want to like I want to like talk to my co-teachers more and say to them that like you just have to love your students unconditionally because you don't know what they're going through in life. You know what I mean? If you were there pretending to be someone, a Jared, like everything was
Mhm.
normal, like what you said, but deep inside, that's something big. What happened to you? That's not a simple trauma. That is something that could really impact your life. And
Mhm.
like I totally understand what you had to go through, what you went through, and that until now you still have the PTSD because it's that's not easy. And for you to share that, it's another strength that you have because not everybody is willing to share it out in the open. But I'm sure, I hope not, but there may be other students, children there going through the same thing, and I really want to hear you tell them, talk to them what they can do at such a young age. I know you did something that you already shared, but like really like talk to them because like some of them could be like you covering it up. But I hope everybody understands that they could be helped. Like I'm a mandated reporter. If I know that one of my students is being maltreated or any sign of neglect, even the slightest one, it's my job to report that. And yeah, maybe it's harsh in the beginning because like maybe there's a need for you to be temporarily taken away from your family, but then we're looking at the long term. Like look what I mean with the impact on you. So I really hope that I appreciate your honesty, but really speak to the people out there, to the kids, like pretend you're a child again, talk to them on how they can fight this. I know sometimes you're young, you can't stop it because maybe the one doing it is like much stronger or like with authority over you, but like what can they do? Jared, what can they do?
I, I think that's a hard thing to answer
I'm
because
sorry, I
no,
know,
it's a fabulous question. And
because I want to help. Like I hate that you had to go through this,
I,
you know
I
what I mean?
I'm hoping something profound comes as I start talking. I
Yeah.
can't guarantee it on this one. Um, and I have that same sentiment that you have. I'm in my 23rd year as an educator,
Yes.
and and I've carried some guilt of even wanting to talk about my story or do the work because my trauma was wrapped in a pretty package. Like you said, I had two parents. They're still married as far as I know. Um, I didn't have food insecurity. We had clothes that we needed. I had a route to go to college. And as a teacher, I have encountered stories that are horrific and similar to mine, but then you layer on top poverty and generational trauma that keeps
Right,
going.
right.
You've seen it, I'm sure. And so it's hard to answer that question
Yes,
um,
I know.
because the short version is to be brave. Like that's what I would say, and it's so hard to do. Um, Looking back on it, I I know I mentally and emotionally did what I had to do to survive, but that bravery did not reach me.
Right,
And
right.
I can look back at some of the teachers I had, and they were amazing. And I remember them to this day. And
Uh-huh.
I know that if I had it in me at that time to say something, they would have helped.
Were you threatened? I'm sorry to ask you. I know in the beginning you said just ask.
Yep.
Were you threatened not to say anything?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's right where I was leading. So perfect timing. My abuser was one of my brothers, and so I lived with him. There was no escape, um, and it there were
Way older than you, correct?
5 years older. Yes.
Okay.
Um, and it was said, you don't want to go into foster care. That's where you'll go. And as an 8, 9, 10 year old, you don't rationalize that it would probably be him that's taken out. You know, you don't
I
know the
thought it
system.
was your father. I'm sorry. I thought it
No,
was one of
no.
your parents.
It was a sibling. Um, where my parents kind of factor into this, and this is why it was so hard. If I ever showed anger or upset about, because my brother was not just my abuser, he was also my bully. In between those times, he wasn't nice to me,
Right.
and it was constant picking. And if I reacted to that, it was, well, just ignore him. You're too sensitive. You're those things. So you layer on top of the abuse that was happening, there's also this environment where it doesn't feel safe to tell.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
you
because
know,
they were ignoring it. They were covering it up.
and when there was conflict between us siblings, there was never a sit down and how to have a conversation about it. It was, you go sit here, you go sit there. It was just avoided. And after a certain amount of time, go do your thing. Don't leave each other alone. Um, so that notion of a sibling relationship just didn't ever form.
Exist.
And
Yeah.
um, I have to say, thank goodness I had my sister. She's an amazing human being, and she protected me more than she realizes, from what was happening, because just her presence, um, I think, prevented other even more instances. But she was also older. I'm the youngest
Right.
out of the four. So once she went to college, it was just the two of us left in the house.
Right.
Um, so so I feel like I kind of rambled and went on a tangent. But that's when you consider all those factors, it's really hard for a kid to be brave. Um, but that's what I
Yes.
would try to encourage them to do. And you start planning your exit. I remember
Right.
10 years
Right.
old. Most 10-year-olds are not thinking about wanting to turn 18 because that's when you can legally leave.
Right.
That's not a typical thought that a fifth grader should be having. But that's where I was at.
Okay.
It was, I'm going to turn 18 and I can leave. So my mind was kind of planning an exit.
Okay. But how many
But,
years
but until
still?
I could get there,
Okay.
it was sort of just figure out how to survive and get through.
Now you mentioned we talked about binge eating. Talk to us about that.
Um, so and 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 this is where I've always been described as having a real sense of self and reflection.
Okay.
This one did not hit my radar. My therapist at a certain point after
Or
some,
you wait, you were saying you had the sense of reflection as when you were younger or now?
just kind of all the time, even
Okay.
in my 20s and 30s,
Okay.
trying to be introspective and be better. But the notion of an eating disorder, um, did not even occur to me that it was
Okay.
a problem. I was working with my therapist for a couple of months, and he said, "So when are we going to talk about your eating disorder?" And I kind of taken aback a bit. And the more I've worked on it and thought about it, and the more I've gotten I'm say I'm in recovery, but food is that addiction that you're never really clean
Right, right.
because you have to eat. So it's a
So
really
what were
hard.
you doing, Jared? Can you be more specific?
Yeah, so starting as a kid, 9, 10 years old,
When it was happening, was that like
that's
your
when I think it started.
okay?
Sort of this notion of food being comfort.
Okay.
Um, and so, there'd be a plate of cookies, and I'd
Okay.
ask for one, and I would figure out how to get three and restack
Okay.
it so it didn't look like I had any. Um, and it was there was never enough.
Okay.
I always wanted more. And when I got out on my own and the package of Oreos ran out, I didn't have to wait for someone to go grocery shopping. I just went and got more. It really kind of took off.
All right.
It was always there, but it really kind of started to spin out of control about 10
Right.
years ago. So I would do things like be driving home and I'd stop for gas, and instead of filling all the way, I'd fill
Right.
the three quarters. I'd hit the button that you can go in and pay inside. Um, and then I would just load up on snacks and junk and pizza and all
Okay.
this garbage from a gas station, grocery.
Right.
And and then I'd get home, and it's the same behavior of any addict. It was a secret. I wouldn't tell. I was
Okay.
hiding it. And then because I was hiding it, and my wife, who's an amazing cook, would have something ready.
So
Well,
is
now,
this still happened when you were married? So this
oh
wasn't
yeah,
just, so for years you had this issue.
yeah. This is ongoing, and I so I define clean for me as not binging,
Okay.
very mindful of what I'm eating and having zero processed sugar. And I am at 4 months and 19 days, so which is, I
Wow.
feel good. Um, but I just have to be very aware of it. It's like all the other mental health pieces. It's never going to go away.
We're
I,
gonna talk about that. Triggers, right?
yeah, I'm never going to not have been raped. I'm never going to
Yes.
have parents who behaved the way they behaved. But what I can do is manage it. And I just have to know. Like, I have to know that on Thanksgiving, I cannot do the traditional Thanksgiving, eat
Okay.
big and then take a nap. I have to be very mindful of what I'm taking in. One binge, one cookie, one cupcake is going to then set off a series of weeks
Right.
of doing that. Um, so I have
Did
to be
you
mindful.
did you worry about, just wondering, because some people do this, have this disorder because of weight. Did you ever worry about weight gain? Just
Oh,
curious.
oh yeah. Oh,
Yes.
100%.
Okay.
And when you're in the throes of it and you're not even thinking about it because food became my emotion and
Okay.
became my emotional
That's
regulator.
interesting.
So I had to have it. And while doing it, I would be thinking, okay, I have to walk this many miles, or if I
Okay.
do this at the gym, or, trying to
Right.
counter it. Um, or you just say, you know what, it's already Wednesday. I'm doing this. I'll start again Monday. Well, I've started again Monday 52 times a year for 10
Right.
years, is what I did. Um, it's exhausting, and
Yes.
that's the hard part because you're using so much of your faculties to manage it.
Yeah.
Um, it's going out to a restaurant with friends and it's the one meal they've had out, but now you're stressed because you were
All right.
telling yourself you'd be good this
Yes.
weekend, but they don't know all the junk you've eaten. So now you're not even good company when you're out. But at the same time, you're looking at their plates, wishing you had all four plates that are on the table in front of you. And it just becomes food became all consuming.
Okay.
I became a school administrator and I knew which teachers had candy where. They thought I was the best principal ever because I would visit classrooms. Well, yeah,
Uh-huh.
you have candy, so of course I'm going to. And I'm hoping none of you talk to each other so that you all don't know that I came and got candy from you. Um, and that's you know how schools are at
Yes.
holiday
Yes.
times. And so all of those things just have become part of what I have to manage and be aware of. Um, and work through, sometimes I'll have this weight where I'm just sad.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
and
I mean,
that in the
you
past,
did say you still have that PTSD, and those
yeah,
are the moments where you're
yeah.
probably triggered, right?
And I've learned I have to sit in that sadness and let it run through me and not turn to pizza or burgers or baked goods, which are my kind of nemesis
Me
now.
too. I
Um,
love those.
and I'm a really good baker, so it doesn't
Oh
help.
no.
Um,
Are you Italian?
no, no, but I've just practiced a lot.
Okay.
So, um, you know, so so it's like
Right.
I have to sit in those emotions, and for the longest time, I couldn't name them. You know, I couldn't name that I was sad, but I
Right.
could
Right.
name I really want a candy bar right now. Um, and that's been an entire learning curve and
Right.
switch
Right.
that
Right.
I've had to do.
Now, this is what I'm interested to know. You did say for years you carried the weight of your trauma in silence,
Hmm.
following the family pattern of pretending everything was fine. And maybe even when you were older, you were still in the pattern of binge eating. And I'm sure you're pretending you're fine, especially you're a school administrator, right?
Hmm.
But at some point, Jared, I'm sure something shifted. What was that turning point that led you to start reclaiming your sense of self and rewriting your story?
There's a couple of moments. So so I think one of the things that I recognized that was happening, but I couldn't do anything about, was that c- for the longest time I was the nice guy, and
Okay.
everybody liked Jared, and he's super nice. And that was when I was doing a really good job of burying it and not thinking about
Okay.
it. And then what started to happen over time was that I became grumpy,
Okay.
and and when I was an
And
administrator,
how old you were already an administrator?
yeah,
Okay.
that's when it kind of, I think the stress level of that type of position started to
Oh, I know.
become overbearing.
I
Um,
have educational leadership. I'm supposed to be an administrator myself, so
yeah,
I
it's a
could
big
sense.
task. And I would hear staff asking my secretary, "How is he today?
Ye-
Is he in a good mood?" And that took me aback.
Yes, of
And I could
course.
understand why they were asking,
Right.
but I couldn't understand what to do to change it and to prevent it. And I think that was the slow break in the dam that
Okay.
started to happen over time. And then really the pivotal moment, sort of the Christmas season of 22 going into the new year of 23,
Okay.
depression just hit, and it hit really hard. And I was having suicidal thoughts, and I was thinking,
Wait, you had kids already at that time, right?
I don't have any kids.
Okay, but you were married already, right?
You know, this
Okay.
is 2 years ago, so
2 years ago, yeah.
42,
Okay.
um, you know, halfway to 43,
Right.
and it was every night, you know, and I started to be afraid to go to sleep.
What, did it ever leave you? I know you've been going to therapy.
Mhm.
Did it ever leave you? And this is just like moments of like everything is coming back. That's why you're feeling depressed.
Back when it started, I think that's what was happening, but
Okay.
I still I couldn't identify it.
All
I
right. Okay.
knew I
All
was sad.
right.
And that inner voice that we all have is very strong, and it's
Right.
strong in whichever direction it speaks to us. And mine was just very negative. I was at the time about 30 pounds heavier than I am now.
Okay.
I knew I was binging, but couldn't stop it. I knew that I was not being who I wanted to be.
Right.
And so the voice starts telling you the world is better off without you. Your wife is better off without you. Um, and fortunately, and my wife had no idea. That's how well trained I am at hiding.
Wait, your wife had no idea you were going through these things in your head, or that you were binge eating?
None of it. None of it.
How could
Um,
you have hidden it from your wife? I'm so like that must have added to your stress,
yeah, it
hiding it
is.
from people.
You know what I've been learning is you're as sick as your secrets, and so those
Yes.
secrets were making me sick. Um, and I think, you know, to her credit, I think she knew something. I
Okay.
think a lot of it got attributed to stress. I was
Yeah, because of your job too. That's
You
a
know,
very
and
stressful
being an
thing.
administrator through the pandemic and the return from the pandemic, and we had, and she was growing in her career, um, and I would be fine, and then she would go to bed, and that's when I would just let it hit. You know, so I'm
Okay.
sitting in our living room in the dark, having these thoughts, you know, trying to figure out how can I end my life in a way that convinces her it's not her fault and that she's not too sad. Um,
Was she aware of the molestation, the sexual, what
she
happened?
was,
Okay.
she was, and I had done therapy in my 20s,
Okay.
and I at the time it helped,
Okay.
and but I think my brain kind of said, okay, check mark, you've taken care of that, but it wasn't,
No. No.
and I am convinced through
Right.
several points in our relationship, we've been together since we were 19, um, that she is the reason I'm alive. I know that to be true because I couldn't figure the way she has loved me. Um, you know, she treats me like a king when I'm feeling like a
Aw.
pauper.
Right.
Um, I could not figure out how to do this in a way that wouldn't make her sad,
Okay. Yeah.
and I never wanted to do that to her. But I'd be sitting there in the dark.
Right.
One of our dogs, she could read me like a book. She'd lay her head in my lap,
Right.
and I still didn't know what was going on. Like my brain did not say, "You're figuring out how to, if you should shut the garage door with the truck running, or
Right.
you should go down to the river and just try to walk into it." You know,
Right.
it didn't register that that's a problem. I went to my doctor for my annual checkup, and they give you the form, you know, verify your prescriptions,
Right. Right.
and,
Yeah.
they have those questions about, you know, in the last 3 months, have you felt depressed? Have you felt
Right. Right. Or suicidal thoughts, stuff
yeah,
like that.
and I just sort of gut responded to each one, circled a number really fast, and when I looked at it, I was like, oh,
You said what? You circled yes?
yeah, it was like staring at me in the face. This is a problem.
Okay.
Um, and I got real scared, and I handed the paper to the nurse, and she looked at it. She got me into a room. You don't wait long for the doctor when you circle those low numbers or
Okay.
the
All
very
right.
frequently, you know. And he just started talking to me, and at the same time I still didn't know it was a problem, but I knew I needed help. I
Okay.
had put a call into some therapist, and finally had an appointment, and so he and I talked.
Okay.
um, you know, he made me make an agreement with him that I would not harm myself, unless I had to call him first, and I
Okay.
keep calling until I got a hold of him, and that was our deal. And he's an amazing doctor. You
That's
hear
good.
about, you know, sort
That's
of the
good.
assembly line of medicine, but
Uh-huh.
he's just not that. So I'm very fortunate there, and just sort of saying it that I needed help and that I was having these thoughts,
Mm.
just it took this weight off.
Right.
So that's my
Right.
other advice to anyone who's been through these things. You've it's so hard to
Admit.
talk about it, but you've
Right.
got to talk about it.
Right.
Um, and that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years, is talking about it, trying new experiences, rewiring my brain to not be in that fight or flight mode that I was constantly living in.
Now, you did, I know, there's so many things that they can learn from you. And I know it took you years to really be open with your
Mhm.
story. Now, let's talk about how can your childhood experiences like now shape your mindset and coping mechanism, because like what you said, it took you years. So what is that thing that you change, and like what steps did you take now to break free from the cycle of emotional suppression and binge eating? I know you went to therapy, but with your own experience, like how what would you advise to others? I know your wife had played a big role.
Yeah.
I know that.
I, I think what started to happen was the life I wanted to live
Okay.
was pretending to live, and what was happening inside, the inside part started to outweigh,
Okay.
what I was
Right.
trying to do. And when that starts to happen, that's when things start to manifest.
Right.
So really, the advice is you have to the question why.
Yes.
So why, when I'm asked to go to a social event, is my immediate answer no? Why, when I walk into a group of new people, is there a pit in my stomach?
Right. Right.
And by
Yes.
asking that question, then I can start to connect it, like, okay, I'm not in danger now.
Okay.
None of these people are going to hurt me. Um, that really started when in therapy, following my individual session, there was a men's group that would come in.
Okay.
Now, a group of men going to a therapist to talk about stuff are probably pretty cool guys, right? So
Okay.
they're in tune. Yet my brain was telling me, end your session on time, get out, get to your truck before they come in, because
Right.
just walking past them, I was filled with dread. And I eventually had to say, why is that?
Right.
And
Right.
through my whole adult life, I have not had a lot of male friends, and that
Okay.
started to change. Um,
Okay.
and so just by asking why is this happening? What is this physical response
Right. Right.
telling me? Whether it is panic or dread or nervousness or anxiousness, um, and so that's part of the advice. Ask why. Find someone to talk to, because that starts
Yes.
to
That's
allow
big.
you it starts to allow you to say, okay, it's my session's not till Monday. It's only Wednesday, and I'm really struggling, but I know Monday is coming.
Right.
I
Right.
put it in this little box on the back shelf in my mind, and we'll talk about it then. And,
Right.
and as you let yourself do that, um, I would suggest anybody read Brene Brown.
Okay.
If being vulnerable um, was really, to me, it was one of those things that I would say to other people, yeah, be vulnerable. It's power, it's strength. But for me, I can't do that because it's weakness. For me, it
Is
would
it because
take,
you're a man? Is it because you're a
yeah,
man or your status?
I think it's the social structure of, how I grew up thinking a man had to be. A lot of my anxiety was knowing that I didn't live up to that definition.
Right. Right. Right.
I wasn't into hunting like my brothers and dad. I wasn't into this and that and building things. I was the kid that was into art and performing and all those things. That starts to bring certain stereotypes, right?
Right.
So that was so out of balance, and I could not reconcile in myself that, yep, a man can want to act on stage, and
Right.
they can be vulnerable, and they can care about other people and show empathy, and rather pet the rabbit than eat it. It's
Right.
so as I've started to bring those things into balance, it's just gotten a bit easier to be comfortable in my own skin. So as hard as it is, I'd encourage anybody, figure out how to be vulnerable and who you can trust to do that with.
Oh my God, Jared, that is so powerful what you just said because just you being a man, like carried that weight because of all the expectations, not because of your gender, because of like your family setup and stuff like that. And it must have been so hard for you growing up dealing with all these expectations, right? That's why I come up with podcasts like this, and I intentionally invite men. I did have a series, two series before, wherein I invited men as guests, like thriving, making an impact, because it's men like you who are learning to be vulnerable that will really have a voice and make an impact in this world because there's so many, I'm sure there's so many men out there going through the same, doesn't have to be the same trauma that you went through, but like just limiting beliefs because they're men, because they can't do this, because this is what's expected of them. But at least we have one here, you, just being vulnerable, sharing your most intimate, the most delicate things that happened to you. And I hope that a lot of people are listening right now, because I mean, you don't wait for years before you can finally find yourself. You know what I mean? Like, I'm glad that you had your wife to hang on to, like your rock. You know what I mean? And like as a teacher, I want to advise students. I know my audience are not students, but teachers know what to do. All you need to do is say something. You know what I mean? Like, you could be in middle school. You were probably in middle school or elementary when those things were happening to you. You just say one thing to your teacher and they will protect you. They will be there to do something. And yes, it might be scary going back home because of what the consequences that may happen to you because you said something. But I hope they know that, hey, if your family really mean well, they will support you.
Hmm.
They are there because they love you. But then if they get mad at you because you needed help and you said something, then you know what, you're better off. You're better off. Some, like, I have been working with students in foster care or being adopted, and you know what, sometimes their life is better. So,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? Sometimes they meet a new family member who genuinely care for them. So I'm just saying that yes, we do have our immediate family, but if that immediate family is not really for your benefit, not helping you grow, sometimes it's time to like ask for help.
Yeah, and I think kids are amazing, and they're
Yes, they
so
are.
perceptive that I've seen those situations too, with kids in my class, and they know, and they can explain out loud better than I ever could have
Yes.
that it is better. Um, and hearing you at one point, it started to bring up, this notion of imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of
Yes.
us suffer from, because what's that boil down to? It's your self belief, and that is such a delicate thing, especially in children, and so I'd like to also give advice to people who maybe weren't victims,
Okay.
but when a victim comes to you,
Yes.
whether they are 4, 10, 14, 25, 50, believe them.
Yes.
Um, being dismissed and feeling like you're not believed
Right.
is almost as bad as
It's worse than
well,
the actual,
you know.
than the,
Um,
yes.
and I went through that. I in my 20s, I came forward and I told my mom what had happened. Um, so a few weeks prior to that, my now wife, then girlfriend, and
All
I,
right.
I so you asked if she knew. She did know. I wanted to propose. I knew I wanted to propose,
Right.
but I was also convinced that if I proposed and we got married, and she then found out, she would leave. And
Okay.
I thought, well, if I really care about her, I don't want to drag her for 5, 10, 15 years through life and
And
then
hide.
find
Yeah.
out and she leave, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna just let her know now.
Night. Okay.
And I did. And in true amazing woman fashion that she is, she just said, okay, eh,
Aw.
what can I do? She
Right.
had the perfect response.
Right.
And that gave me, for the first time, I felt power, like, and seen
Right.
and heard. And so a few weeks later, I was home and talking with my mom, and I said, we're engaged, and have you picked a date? All those usual things that
Right.
when an engagement is new. I said, we're still talking about it, but I do want to talk to you about something. Um, I don't want my brother at the wedding.
Of course.
And,
Are you in speaking terms with your brother?
no,
So
no.
never. After that.
This
Yeah.
was back in my 20s, so
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Because part of keeping up the facade, I had to have a relationship with him. Because if I didn't, it
Yes.
would raise questions, right?
Right. 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 Right.
Um, so, so I tell her what happened, and that's why I don't want him to be at the wedding or in it. And her response was, well, that was a long time ago. I'm sure he doesn't even remember.
That's a
And
tough one.
and instead of
That's a tough one to
and I was
digest.
so new to this idea of saying it out loud
Okay.
that instead of saying, but I remember and
Okay.
I carry it with me and that's what matters, I said, oh, I hadn't thought of that. And she said, you should call him. And so it's almost like you rip a Band-Aid off and the bleeding is bad, so you smack it one right back on. And that's what I did. I put a mental Band-Aid back on, and
Okay.
the next thing I know, I'm calling him.
Okay.
I apologize for stuff that happened, is what I called it, and asked him to be a groomsman. And that it was like putting a seal back on the can, and like it had never been opened. And so was in the wedding doing all these things. um,
how did you feel when you finally had that courage to apologize and invite him to be a groomsman?
I felt numb because I didn't want to do it because there was no real healing. Um, I was asking him because that's what my mom told me to do, and I had to play the part of the good son and do that. He and I have never had a true conversation
Okay.
about it. He's never acknowledged it, and neither have my parents. Um, Fast forward almost 20 years later, and I'm suicidal. I'm getting into therapy, and I wrote my parents a letter and electronically,
Okay.
so that I had record of it,
Yes.
and just outlined like this is all the stuff. I've been suicidal, I'm dealing with anxiety, I'm on antidepressants, I'm in a 12-step program for binge eating, I'm doing weekly therapy, I'm journaling, I'm writing about, this is all the stuff
Right.
that happened. And and the response I got back was so minimal. um I my dad, I don't even remember what he wrote. My mom just kind of wrote back, "Will always love you," um, kind of missing the point. And so for me, I just cannot imagine if I had children, one of them telling me they were suicidal, and my
And
response
just
not
saying, I still
being,
love you.
"I will
Yeah.
be right there," or "What do you need from me to help?" or "I don't know what to do, but I'll do whatever it takes." Um, and I didn't get that. And we had a few more exchanges back and forth. Theirs were
Okay.
always very minimal. Um, and so I've never closed the door on communication, but we
Okay.
really haven't communicated. It'll be 2 years this summer. And I didn't close that door, but I have put a structure to it.
Okay.
I'm willing to communicate with you, but I need it in writing because I don't yet trust myself if we're talking on the phone or in person
So
to,
you're only willing to communicate with them in writing,
yeah.
nothing in person.
No, because
They trigger you.
yeah, we hadn't, when I was in therapy the first time in my 20s, we went a couple of years without talking. Um, and then we invited them to our home to talk. And what it turned into was, you should have told us sooner. Why
Which
didn't
part? Which one? The suicidal one or the
about the
thing with your brother?
about the abuse with my brother. So it really just kind of turned into victim blaming,
Oh, yes.
and so I don't want to do that
You're
again.
right.
And I'm insistent on writing because if I get any words from them, I want to be able to process it.
Right,
I
right.
want to avoid the "I didn't say that" or "that's not how I said it," which is how they tend to operate. Um, and I've told them that I want them to come and do a therapy session, which is something they don't do,
Okay.
and so they won't. And so that's pretty much where it's left. Um, I, I would love to have a relationship with them, but I just can't, and I'm not willing to, for my sake, to have one that requires me to pretend it didn't happen. And that's it was a hard line to draw. Um, but the further away I get from it, the more I recognize that it's what I had to do. Um, and I think a lot of times, and through various conversations or wherever, and someone learns that I don't really speak to my parents, we're very quick to say, but they're your parents.
Right. Right.
And my response is exactly. And
Right.
that comes
Right.
with it a certain responsibility. And when that responsibility is not met, I've got to take care of me. So, so that's where we're at on the parent front.
Jared, I'm a big family person, right?
Hmm.
But listening to your story, y- can I say something? You have all the right to turn your back on them. I'm sorry. Right now it's you. Please take care of you. You have a wonderful wife, you have a wonderful job, and sometimes you tried. You even reach. I don't think anyone can even do what you did, like calling your brother again and asking him to be your groomson. That's a big step on your part, and like on top of that, you still do not see any effort on him to just simply say sorry. By all means, you have the right, you now have the right to say, I did my job, I did my part, I am now gonna worry about me.
Yeah.
And you're 42. You have, I'm not saying it's a waste of time, but because it's never too late to start
Right.
over. But
Right.
you need to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Please take care of yourself. I look at you, and just the fact that you are an administrator, I'm sure a lot of people look up to you, your staff, the students, the community. You know what? Now, get those positive energy and make them part of your life, and anything that don't serve you anymore, anyone that pulls you down, say goodbye. I'm sorry. Like,
What 100%. And so I was 42 when I was suicidal. So I'm now 44. Uh,
right.
I just want to point that out so that I maybe look younger than my age.
You
Uh,
do look young.
that's the goal anyway. Um, but and what you're saying, I love that, and I think it's a great message for your listeners, and it brings us back to that topic of vulnerability
Right.
because that's where the power has been. When you start to say, okay, yes, they're my blood, or yes, they're my family, but they're not good for me, and you put those boundaries in place and you get vulnerable. I think one of the pivotal things that helped me was in the month of September is Suicidal Awareness Month.
Okay.
And on my Facebook page, I only posted about that. And so every day I posted something to try to raise awareness about suicide. And it was statistics or resources. Here's the hotline if you're feeling, and then on the very last day, I just posted a video, kind of explaining how I got to that spot. When
Right.
outside
Right.
looking in, like you've said, I have an amazing wife. I have a great career. We have a home. We're financially secure. We've got all these things, and yet I still got there. And gave a little tidbit of what had happened as a child, but it's Facebook, so you can only say certain things, right? Um, the response I got from that was so incredible
Yes.
from people that I have known for years, people that I barely know, people who I've
Right.
only known through Facebook. Um, One of my former classmates in high school and elementary school reached out to me and shared some of his story, and neither one of us had any clue what the other was going through. We just knew we were friendly in school.
Right.
Um, that that for me was such evidence of the power of being vulnerable,
Right. Right.
that it's helped me open up to other relationships, and so I now have friendships with men and women. I have a coach at my gym who is amazing,
Right.
and he's just one of those humans that you immediately start to open up with.
All
And
right.
then you're done with an hour long conversation and you're like, wait, why did I just say that? um, but if I was still in the mode of pretending, then those things don't happen. And so if we're looking for sort of advice for listeners and for other people who've been victimized, it's to illustrate that power of sharing your story and being
Right.
vulnerable gives you. Um, because at this point, you know, when this streams and when other people learn it, um, and I've shared with people at work that, yeah, I'm in a 12-step program for food addiction and I work the 12 steps and I have a sponsor and I do all those things. Any other power people have over you is gone, right? Because the secrets are
Yes.
leverage. So if you're not worried about it getting
Yes.
out, you're good. So that so I now feel more powerful and comfortable in my own skin than I've ever felt. So I would just say to people, it's hard, it's difficult, it's uncomfortable, but it's so worth it.
A big thing in my podcast is, I think, what you've now finally reached at this point. You've reached your resilience
Hmm.
and you've reached your authenticity. You know what? Like, you are now finally able to just embrace the challenges, all the hardships, all the struggles you dealt with, and make it part of you. And I hope you continue doing that, because now, we have no choice. It's now part of us. So it's either you're going to like suffer and grieve, or just move on and make you stronger. And I feel that you now have reached the point of resilience, or you're even at the point wherein you're spreading suicide prevention. And that's big, not just as an administrator, but as a community member. You know what I mean? You are actually empowering others to find their vulnerability and be open, because, like what you said, your strength started when you became vulnerable.
Hmm.
And how many people out there will just let go of their, like, oh, I'm a man, I'm not, I can't be vulnerable, I have like a standard to show. Like, how
Too
many
many,
men
too many.
out there can finally say that I can still be vulnerable and still be a man? And guess what? It's the best feeling. It's the best feeling when I can actually make an impact in the world. And I'm not just doing this for the sake of, it's a relief that you're now, I have accepted that these things happen to you, but at the same time you're using it to impact other people.
Thank you. I'm trying and trying to make that impact positive. You know, and the hardest part, or the hardest thing that I've had to accept, was not that it happened, but like I said, this is for life. I will be managing this for life, and
Right.
that it has been the most challenging thing for me to reconcile, and to be comfortable with. I'm not 100% there, but I'm getting there. And it's recognizing there is no checkbox
Right.
saying, okay, I talked about it, so check, I'm done, and never have to think about it again. And there's still going to be crappy days. And some of those days are going to be because you're just stuck in a memory. And some of
Right.
those days are just because you have a bad day in life, you know, and not letting that be where you stay and where you live, but kind of letting it run its course and moving on. And it's worth it. You
I
know,
mean,
and my wife and I, we've been together. It'll be in the fall, 26 years since our
wow.
first date,
That's a big thing to celebrate
and we
about.
are now closer and having more real and honest
Uh,
conversations about our inner thoughts than we've ever had, and it's amazing.
right.
So for anybody out there that's nervous or scared, I get it. I was there, but again, it's so worth it. So worth it.
Quickly,
Yes.
just going back, because you did mention that it's part of you. Let's talk about that trigger and setbacks, right? And that's a challenge in your healing, because at any time it can happen. I know it's hard to answer, but how do you navigate those moments when it just keeps pulling you back? The past tries to pull you back, and what strategy we kind of need? Like, how do you do it? What strategies have really have helped you stay grounded in your present life? Like, what can you?
Yeah. Eh, I've gotten pretty good at recognizing when I'm sad,
Okay.
and also recognizing that I don't have to know why,
Okay.
because that usually comes later.
All right.
It'll be a memory that surfaces or something like that. It's silly, but when I'm feeling anxious, I saw this strategy on Instagram and it's been working. I've named my anxiety. So I've named him Bernard. Because in my mind, it's kind of like a chauffeur or
Uh-huh.
a butler name. And so I use some four-letter words to
Okay.
tell Bernard where he needs to go.
Oh.
And it is ridiculously effective for such a silly thing.
All right.
But I enjoy humor. I like a good joke, so it makes me kind of smile, and I can get right back to work or what I was doing. The hardest part and the strategies I'm still trying to build are for the PTSD pieces.
Okay.
Um,
You'll get there.
because it just, a memory will hit and it'll hit random and I've learned that if I try to fight it, it doesn't go well. So I have to let myself relive it.
All
And
right.
so I try to process
Yes.
those through talking about it, writing. I'm working on writing my story. It's going very slow, but
It's
sure.
okay.
Um, I've written poetry about it, drawn images and things that just to get it out, and that seems to help quite a bit. And then with the food stuff, it's messaging with my sponsor. It's recognizing I only have to get through today,
Right.
or yep, there's a big celebration at the office, and it's okay. I can still enjoy it without the food, and just sort of presetting and reminding myself before I go into those situations.
Can I sort of step it up? Maybe like something you can do because you have such power. You're an administrator, okay? And now you have a community on Facebook. Just use your voice, spread awareness. That's the best thing that you can do. Spread awareness to others and really, really give them actionable steps as you go through your healing. Share with others what worked and what didn't because everybody is different. But as a school administrator, just the suicide prevention, especially if you're an administrator for middle school or high school students, because suicide happens at that age. And the fact that those poor kids think that there's no way out is tragic, like just make them aware that these things can happen and that we are there to help them. You know what I mean? Like just use your power as an individual because hey, like I look up to administrators. You have such a powerful influence, not just with your teacher, community, and student, that you can actually make a change and start by using what you went through. It that you don't have to tell everybody exactly what you went through, but be an advocate for change, and that's big, Jared. And I think people need that right now. People need to know what happens in real life situation, and that there's always a way out. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Don't wait for years.
yeah, absolutely. And I think the good thing now is there's so much more in terms of resources, and
Start
there's
a podcast.
ways to reach out for help.
Yeah.
So we promote those with our students and talking about. I really started talking about mental health for staff
Right.
because they
Right. Right.
carry the burden of what their students are going through. It's heavy.
Right.
So making sure they know where resources are and just trying to live by example
Yes.
and
Yes.
owning, yeah, sometimes I've been a real jerk and I know why. um,
Right.
it doesn't mean it's okay, but I'm trying to fix it and I'm trying to live each day, um, making sure someone feels seen and heard.
Well, guess what? I'm listening to you. I learned a lot from you. There are others there who are ready to listen, and sometimes it needs a strong person to just be vulnerable and share their story because not everybody's willing to do that. So where else can they learn real life but from us,
Yes.
right? Um, I just wanted to let you know also that I have a global education connection. Um,
Oh wow.
a firm wherein, because I can't totally leave the field of education, I've
Hmm.
seen a lot where I have digital courses and professional development and workshop globally. I just want to really empower the field of education, just share what what I've learned, my education, my experiences as an educator, because you and I go through professional development and real, like every day is just a learning experience for
Hmm.
us. So
Oh,
why
it's always
not put
something
it right? Why not put it together and just, like I said,
Yeah.
spread,
And
spread
if you're
everything.
an educator, it's in your blood. So you
Yes, I
never
can't. Like
stop doing it.
I did leave the field of education last year because of this calling, being a speaker, Jared. But no, my heart is still there.
Yep.
It's,
I understand.
I can't, right? So again, spread awareness, and please share with us later. Please give me all the links to your community, to what you have, because people need to know that there's a space there where they can be honest and open and learn from each other. Now, Jared, are you doing this professionally? Are you coaching people? Like anything else that you're doing?
I'm not at that point yet.
Okay.
But it's one of those thoughts that's sort of a seed in my mind
Right.
to, you know, what I kind of see as the first step is doing things like this.
Right.
And eventually I'd love to do some public speaking engagements and just share my story
Right.
and share resources along the way, so that people know that there is help.
And not only that, people will learn that, hey, if he he experienced all these things and got through it, and he is an administrator, and I can go past my trauma in life and still be the best version of myself. What I mean? You're giving hope to others that no matter how painful or difficult life was with you growing up, that there is still a way to move forward you know
Yep, there's plenty of reasons that I shouldn't be successful, but you just got to find the one reason to be successful,
right.
and it's there for everybody.
And I'm just glad that you finally, that your vulnerability is your strength. And please don't stop talking about it, because there's so many people out there who need to hear these things. And hopefully it's not too late, and they don't have to wait for years to finally get out of it,
Right.
whatever trauma they're experiencing at the moment. Please know that the teachers are here to help you. um, it's so easy to say don't be scared, but fear is real. Like,
Mhm.
but you know what, but there's always going to be help. Help is better. Fear is something scary, but at the same time, when help comes, it's much wider. You know what I mean? It's wider than the fear.
And it is
So
there. It is there.
right. So
Well, no worries.
just
The sharing train has left the station, so it's not going back.
yes, yes, I love that. Jared, before we wrap up, I always ask my guest for one last piece of, let's say, a quote, concept, or topic that you want the viewers to remember you with, like something strong that they know that, hey, that's something that I can do, or that's something that I remember Jared went through, that I can actually you know practice or do it in my life? Like, what's one thing that you want to leave the audience with?
I think I'd point out, like I mentioned earlier, that inner voice and how strong it
Yes.
is.
Yes.
And so, if nothing else, take away that if your inner voice is telling you everything that's wrong with you, it can be just as powerful to point out what's right
Right.
and find those things because they're there. Um, I have criticized myself for physical features, for performance, for emotion dysfunction, however you want to word it. But now I can find physical features that's like, oh yeah, those dumbbell curls are paying off, and I can find moments where I was a great human and helped somebody. And so when that inner voice is talking, push it to the positive. And that's where change occurs.
I love that, Jared. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for
Um,
having me. This has been a blast.
I know, and Jared, you're like I said, I am choosing 10 guests for this series, and so far each guest are have been really giving really good strategies and advice, and like I encourage you like to follow the series because it's all of us going through childhood trauma and just learning from each other, and you might even find something new that might work for you. All
Oh,
right.
absolutely. I've been listening to some of your previous seasons, so and I learn a lot. So
Thank you.
I certainly will check out this series.
And guess what? Maybe you can start your own podcast as well. Go big with, but you have so much lessons that people can resonate with. Go wider, and I'll be one of your fans.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Jared, so thank you for your vulnerability and for sharing your story with us. Um, how can the viewers find you if they want to, like, sometimes they still have questions. How can they
Yeah.
find you?
So I'm on Facebook, and then I'm
Mhm.
also on Instagram. My
Okay.
personal page is Jared
Hmm.
Gambit, like the X-Man, all one word. And then my business page, I do have a small photography business on the side.
Okay.
So that is Jam underscore photo 24.
And when I publish this, Spotify, YouTube, and soon Apple Podcasts. I also share it on multiple social media platforms on several pages. I want to make sure I have the links to what you said.
Okay.
So I'm going to reach out to you, give me direct links so that, they can directly contact you. Because you know what? I see you getting big. I see you
Well, thank
spreading
you.
more.
And I
I don't think
welcome
you can
that.
stop.
Um, you know, and I'd love to take credit for this wording, but my sponsor's an incredible human, and so I've learned this from him. You spend so much time not loving yourself that if someone out there is not loving themselves, they I want them to reach out, and I will love them for them until they can do it themselves. So I certainly invite any messages, outreach. If I can't help you, I know enough resources that I will connect you somewhere that can.
And I just wanted to like strengthen what you said, that I too went through a healing process. My husband passed away 2023 and 20. That was my driving force for change. That's what drove me to become a speaker. And that's when I found my authentic self, like really going inward. What don't I like about myself? What's good about myself, and just
Mhm.
embracing them. And I can say that at this point, Jared, I love who I am. Like
It's
everything that
incredible,
happened,
isn't it?
and everything that happened in my life is now part of me. And there's still going to be struggles and challenges, and I just meet it head on, and I learn from each challenge or setback that I go through on a daily basis. I just I just deal with it head on, and it becomes part of me, and learn lessons from it. And I'm at the point wherein I am so proud of myself. I love myself. And like what you said, if there anybody out there who is still doubting themselves and don't know their self-worth, don't they still have those self-doubts, Jared and I are here to let you know that once you find your most authentic, genuine self, it's the best feeling. It's the best tool that you can have to overcome anything that happens your way,
So well
right?
said. 100% agree.
There's nothing pulls me down anymore, Jared. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know
Like
you're going to
being
get through each thing because you've
right.
already gotten through some rough times. So I'm sorry that happened, but I'm so impressed with the platform you've created and the
Thank
space
you.
you've created. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
I mean, I never realized I'd meet incredible people. And you know what? I realized the most incredible men and women that I've been meeting are the ones with real stories. It's because they've embraced all those things
Hmm.
and made them become their authentic selves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And every day I meet, whenever I have guests, I am in awe of like just the connection I have with them, and like the stories that they can share, because like I'm sure this podcast at some point is going to go big because we have real genuine guests with real stories and real solutions. They don't have to go far. All they have to do is open any podcast, find a podcast that they can resonate with.
Hmm.
And some answers are just right there in front of you. You don't have to go far, right?
Yeah.
So again, Jared, your journey is a testament to the power of resilience and healing. Thank you again
Thank
for
you.
being here. And to our listeners, know that trauma from your childhood does not define you. It can be the very thing that shapes your strength and your purpose. Your story matters. Please know that. Your healing journey is valid. And if you have a story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Be part of this amazing series and help others find hope in their own journey. If you want to know more about me, my website is candiceruggiero.com, and my social media is linktree slash Candice Ruggiero. Jared, again, thank you for being here. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And until the next time, keep growing, keep healing, and remember, everyone, you are not alone. Have a good evening. Take care. Bye bye.